What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS3 tutorial. So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to fully jailbreak your PS3 on firmware version 4.85 or lower. Now I have already done a video just like this for 4.84, but of course the 4.85 update had to come out, so I'm kind of redoing this tutorial for 4.85. So this tutorial is part of a series of tutorials. This is episode 1 on how to jailbreak your PS3, but I also have episodes that are already out. Episode 2 shows you how to install Webman and Multiman homebrew apps and plugins. Episode 3 shows you how to install games, DLC and updates. We've also covered stuff like running games from your external hard drive. We're going to be covering things like emulators, running Linux, how to connect to PSN on your jailbroken PS3, and how to install mod menus. So yeah, you can check out the playlist link in the description so that once you've jailbroken your PS3, you can then follow those other videos to get everything set up to get the most out of your jailbroken system. So yeah, let's get into this. So to jailbreak your PS3, first of all, if we head into the system settings and we go down to system information, you can see I am on firmware version 4.85, which is the latest firmware right now from when I'm recording this video. Now in the future there might be a 4.86 or a 4.87 update, and if there are, I'll put a pinned comment in the comment section of this video to tell you guys if it's okay to follow this video if you're on firmware version say 4.86 or 4.87 in future. It'll probably be fine to follow this video on higher firmwares, but just in case, check the comment section if you are watching this in the future. However, if you're on 4.85, you're fine to follow this. If you're going from any firmware version, you could be on 4.60, you could be on 4.81, 4.84, 4.85, it doesn't matter. As long as you're on firmware version 4.85 or lower, you can follow this video to jailbreak your PS3. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going from stock firmware, which is the firmware that your PS3 is currently running when it's not jailbroken. And then we're going to go from stock firmware to hybrid firmware. Now the hybrid firmware allows you to do a kernel exploit through the PS3's web browser, just like the PS4 exploit, but it's only a tethered exploit, meaning the exploit has to be done every time you reboot the system. So it does allow you to do a lot of the functions that you can do with a jailbroken PS3 with custom firmware, like running homebrew apps and stuff, but it's not a full untethered jailbreak like running custom firmware on your PS3 is. So we're only going to use that exploit as a stepping stone to then install the full custom firmware. So we're going to be going from stock firmware to the hybrid firmware, then to custom firmware, or stock to a tethered exploit, then to the full untethered jailbreak. Now all PS3s can install the hybrid firmware and do the tethered exploit, but for the full untethered jailbreak, the full custom firmware, not all PS3s can install that. So all fat models are fine. If you have a fat model PS3, then no worries for you. You can install the custom firmware. If you have a super slim 3000 or 4000 series, you cannot install custom firmware on a super slim. So sorry, you'll still be able to do the hybrid firmware exploit, the tethered exploit, but you will not be able to install custom firmware on it. And as for the regular slim PS3s, most of them are jailbreakable, some of them are not. And that depends on the minimum firmware version that console came out of the factory on. The minimum firmware version has to be 3.56 or less. If your minimum firmware version of your PS3 is higher than 3.56, you cannot install the custom firmware on it. But if it's 3.56 or lower, then you can install the custom firmware on it. So if you do have a PS3 Slim and you want to know what is my minimum firmware version to know if you can jailbreak it or not, there is a test that we can run to check what your minimum firmware version is. So if we head over to our computer here and we go to ps3exploit.com, this is the main exploit website that we're going to be using throughout the video. It will be linked in the description, of course. And then you're going to want to go to Flash Writer and download minver.pup. So if we download the minimum version pup file here and we'll open this up, and then what we're going to do is get a USB drive. So you want to get a USB drive that is formatted in FAT32 format. So if you right click and go to properties on your USB drive, make sure the file system says FAT32. If it doesn't, then back up any files that were already on it, because you'll need to reformat it, which will wipe any data that's currently on the drive. So you right click and format it, and select FAT32 as the file system. Now, if you don't have FAT32 as the option, like I don't here, then that's because your USB drive is too large. So you'll either have to partition it into a smaller partition and format that in FAT32, or use an external formatting tool like Aomi Partition Assistant, for example. This is the tool I use, which I'll link in the description. So with an external program like Aomi Partition Assistant, you just right click on the USB drive, you go to Format Partition, and then it has all the formats in here, including FAT32 you can select. Click OK, and then click Apply in the top left to format the drive in FAT32 format. So once your USB drive's in FAT32 format, you want to go into the USB drive, and then you want to copy the PS3 folder from the minimum version pup zip file into your USB drive. So you'll have PS3 and then an update folder, and then the PS3 updat.pup file. Now this is basically an update file for your PS3, but it's not going to update the system. It's just going to tell you what the minimum firmware version of your console is. So unplug your USB drive and plug it into your PS3. Okay, so on the PS3, we're going to go to System Update, Update via Storage Media, and then it'll say minver check, so click OK. And then you'll get the following message that will say update data of version 1.97 or later can be installed on this system. So the minimum version for my console is 1.97. Now, as long as that number for you is 3.56 or less, then you can jailbreak your PS3, no problem. If, however, it's higher than 3.56, like 3.60 or higher, then you can't install custom firmware on your PS3, you can't jailbreak it, but you will still be able to install the hybrid firmware and do the tethered exploit. So once you've confirmed that you can jailbreak your system, we'll start with the first step, which is installing the hybrid firmware onto your PS3. So what you want to do is unplug your USB stick and plug it back into your computer. And then if we head back to the PS3 exploit website, ps3exploit.com, and then click on the 4.85.1 hybrid firmware. Of course, if you're watching this in future, it might be 4.86 or 4.87 hybrid firmware. And if the link isn't there on the home page, you can find it by going to V3 Hand Tools and going down to HFW Hybrid Firmware, which should take you to the same place. So if we click this, it will take us to a post on PSX Place. Again, it will be a different post if it's 4.86 or 4.87 hybrid firmware, but there should be a download link somewhere on the post. So we're going to go ahead and download hybrid firmware for 4.85.1, and I've copied it out here to my desktop, hybrid firmware 4.85. So we're going to open this up. And it's a zip file, so you can just open it up in whatever archiver you choose. And then we're going to go back onto our USB stick here, go back into the PS3 folder, the update folder. If you didn't use the minimum firmware version checker, just create these folders yourself. So create a PS3 folder in the root of the USB stick, then create an update folder inside that folder. So then we're going to delete the minimum version pup file that's in here. So just get rid of that. And then copy the hybrid firmware pup file into that same location, so into the update folder. Okay, so once it's copied over, you're going to rename this. So it's just called PS3 updat.pup, just like the minimum firmware version was called. It's not update.pup, there's no E, so just PS3 updat.pup. And then we can unplug that USB stick and plug it back into our PS3 once more. Okay, and once again, we're going to go to System Update, Update via Storage Media. This time it says hybrid and exploitable 4.85, so click OK and just do the update. You get the license agreement, so go over to the right, select accept, and then start, and that will start installing the hybrid firmware. Again, this is just a stepping stone firmware that we need because the hybrid firmware gives us access to the tethered exploit, which will give us access to the software flashing tools that we can then use to patch the system and then write the full custom firmware afterwards. Alright, and there we go. We're good. We now have the hybrid firmware installed. Alright, so that's fine, but if that did work perfectly for you, you should also install the update a second time. This is recommended because apparently if you only install it once, it can sometimes, I guess, not write the firmware properly, or there can be some issues. So it's always recommended that you install the firmware twice. Now, if you were having any problems during that update where you got an error saying that there was a problem during the copy operation, or it just wouldn't let you install the firmware because it says you already have the firmware installed or something like that, boot your system into recovery mode. So to boot into recovery mode, you have to turn your PS3 off, then hold down the power button and keep the power button held down until you hear it beep twice. Now, if it doesn't work the first time, if it just switches the console off, just hold down the power button again, do it a second time, it should work the second time, and then it will boot you into recovery mode. Okay, so once you boot into recovery mode, you will need to connect your PS3 controller via USB cable to the PS3 because the wireless will not work on the controller for this. So press the PS button on your controller once you have it connected, and then scroll down to option 6 for system update. Select that option, press start and select at the same time. Alright, and then you'll get this message popping up, 4.85.1 hybrid firmware, press the PS button. So the user agreement pops up here, so go over to the right, accept it, and then press X. And it will start installing the hybrid firmware again, this time through recovery mode, and it should work here this time if you're having any issues with the previous method of installing the update. So just wait for this to install. Now I have technically installed the update twice now. First using the method through the PS3's normal home screen XMB, and now I'm installing it again in recovery mode, so I am installing the firmware twice as recommended. So make sure you do the update twice. Alright, so there we go. So we now have the hybrid firmware fully installed. So we're going to head over to the internet browser, or perform an internet search first of all. And we want to go to http://ps3exploit.com. Head to that website. Okay, did a Google search again, whatever. We'll go to the top option right here, the first one, and that will take us to the same website we're on the computer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the flash dumper, and we're going to dump flash to USB. Now, this isn't a 100% required step, but I would recommend you do this because we want to back up the flash of our PS3 before we patch it, because when we patch it, we're editing the flash and that can go wrong. If it does go wrong and you don't have a backup of your original flash, then you could potentially be, stuck with a bricked console, which is not what you want, of course. So if anything does go wrong, if you've backed up the flash beforehand, then you can always restore that to get the console working again, but we want to back it up just in case. So then you'll have two options, NAND or NOR. Some consoles use NAND, some use NOR, so you need to find out which one your console uses. So if you're on a Slim, it will pretty much be a NOR guaranteed. But with fat consoles, you might have a NAND system or you might have a NOR system. So to find out if your console is a NAND or a NOR system, you can use the model number of your console. So there'll be a little sticker on your console somewhere on the bottom or on the back of the console. And as you can see on mine's right there, it says CECHM03. So on your computer, I'll link this in the description. So on PS3 Dev Wiki, this gives you all the information about the different models. So if you find your model, so in my case, mine was a CECHM03. So it's right here, CECHMXX. And then as you can see, it says it's a NOR system. So I know that mine is a NOR system based on the flash. So look up your model number and check to see if it's a NAND or a NOR system, and that's how you'll know. So once you've figured out whether yours is a NAND or a NOR system, select either NAND or NOR on here. So I'm going to select NOR. So click OK to the message and this will pop up. And what we're going to do is we're going to bookmark this page. So what you want to do is press triangle, go to bookmarks, my bookmarks, and add a bookmark for the flash dumper. And then just hold down circle to close window. Then we're going to go to flash writer, 4.85 hybrid firmware, and then write flash to USB. And then again, select NAND or NOR on whether you have a NAND system or a NOR system. So I'm going to select NOR again. And we're not using this yet, but we're just going to bookmark it for later. So we're going to press triangle. We're going to go to bookmarks, my bookmarks, and once again, add another bookmark for that right there. Then we're going to hold down circle again to close it. So now we're going to clear all of our cookies and website data. So press triangle, head to tools, go down to delete cookies and say yes. Then go to tools, delete search history. And then again, tools, delete the cache. And once again, tools and delete the authentication information. Then press triangle, go to tools, go to home page and select use a blank page. And then click OK. And then finally close out of the browser. Now the reason we deleted all of those cookies to get the exploit working as efficiently as possible, to run into less issues while trying to use the exploit, you want the browser to be running as lightweight as possible. So then we're going to open the web browser, open it back up again. That will just take you to a blank page now. and then press triangle, go to your bookmarks, my bookmarks, select the flash memory dumper. So select that, click OK. So you want to make sure that your USB stick is plugged into the rightmost USB port. So the USB port on the right of the system, on the front, because that is USB 000, which is already ticked for you. I think USB 006 is the left USB port in the front, and USB 001 is the back USB port, but I could be wrong. So just to be safe, make sure you have the USB stick plugged into the rightmost USB port and that you have USB 000 checked. Then you want to initialize the exploitation. Now this might not work perfectly the first time. Oh, never mind, it worked okay. So you'll have the same options with the NAND page as you do with the NOR page. So you initialize the exploitation and you wait for it to say success. If it fails, then just try again. If it keeps failing, close the browser, reopen it, go back to this page, try again. If it's still failing, then clear your cookies and website data again, reopen it, keep trying, eventually it'll work. And then you can dump the 16 megabyte NOR flash to USB device, or if you're on a NAND system, click the button to dump your NAND flash to the USB device. And that starts dumping the flash to your USB drive. Okay, there we go. NOR flash dump operation completed. So at this point, you can close out of the browser and unplug your USB drive and plug it back into your computer. So then on your computer, create a folder somewhere called PS3 flash backup. And back up the file. So if you go into your USB drive, you'll now have this dump.hex file, which is the backed up flash. So you're going to copy that to the folder you made on your computer and just keep this folder in a safe place, somewhere that you're not going to delete, just in case you ever need it in future. And I'm going to rename the dump to orig for original, because it is our original flash. We haven't modified the flash yet. So then we can just delete the one off the USB stick now. So now we're going to get ready to actually patch the flash so that we can write our custom firmware to it. So now we want to go to the flash writer 4.85 hybrid firmware and download the flash hex file. So you want to download that to your computer, and then we're going to copy that to our USB drive. Just copy it to the root of the USB drive, not in any folders. Sometimes when you download the file, it can be corrupted. This file cannot be corrupted. If it's corrupted, it's going to break your PS3. So you might want to take the peace of mind just to check to make sure the file isn't corrupted once you've copied it to your USB drive. Now to do that, you can check the MD5 hash. I'll put this MD5 hash in the description. It'll be called flash 4.85 MD5, and then this MD5 hash. So you want to make sure that your file matches the same hash as the one that's in the description. So to check, if you search for onlinemd5.com, it'll take you to this website where you can drag your flash hex file onto the program, which will give you the MD5 hash, and then you can copy the MD5 hash from the description and paste it in here, and it'll compare them. And if they're the same, it should have the little tick to show that they are identical. And that means your file is not corrupted. If it is corrupted, re-download it, or use a different downloader, use a different web browser to download it, use a third-party download manager like EagleGet or Internet Download Manager or something to download the file if it's not the same. I'll also include any MD5 hashes for future flash hex files like 4.86 or 4.87 in future, also in the description. Alright, so that's just for peace of mind. Okay, so now that you have the flash file on your USB, you're going to unplug it and plug it back into the PS3 once more. Again, making sure you plug it into the rightmost USB port. And then we're going to go onto the internet browser, which will open up to our blank page. And then we're going to press triangle. We're going to go to bookmarks. This time, my bookmarks. This time we're going to select the NOR flasher, not the dumper, but the NOR flasher. So we're going to select NOR flasher, or of course NAND flasher if you're on a NAND system. So this looks pretty much the same. You have flash 4.85.hex. So USB 000 is ticked, which is the rightmost USB port. And then we're going to once again initialize the exploitation. There we go. So it was successful. Again, same thing applies. If it doesn't work the first time, keep trying. Delete your website data, cookies, reopen the browser. Do what you got to do. Keep trying. It will eventually work. So once it says success, we can patch the NOR flash memory or again on a NAND system, it will be called patch NAND flash memory. So one final warning, if you're on an incompatible PS3, so a PS3 whose minimum firmware version is higher than 3.56, or you're on a super slim 3000 or 4000 series, do not progress any further with this. You cannot go any further if you're on one of those PS3s. You could potentially break your PS3 if you go any further if you're on one of those incompatible models. If, however, you're on a PS3 that's 3.56 or lower minimum firmware, then you're good to go. So for us, we can go ahead and patch flash memory and wait for this to complete. Okay, so once it's done, it will say that the flash memory patch was completed. It says you can dump the noir now and check to see if the patch has been applied successfully, then reboot to enable the patches and install the 4.85 custom firmware of your choice. Perfect, so that's what we're going to do. Again, this is something you can debate on whether or not you have to do it, but I would recommend dumping the flash again just to make sure it was patched successfully. Again, we're trying to avoid the chance of you bricking your system here, because every single step we're doing at this point has the potential to brick your system if it's not done correctly. So we're going to dump our flash again and check to see if it was patched successfully. So to do that, we're going to exit out of the browser again, reopen the browser, then press triangle, go down to bookmarks, my bookmarks, go back to the flash memory dumper. So back to the dumper again, initialize the exploitation, and then dump the 16 megabyte NOR flash to USB device, or NAND flash to USB device. Again, making sure the USB stick's plugged into the rightmost USB port, USB 000, that's ticked. And that will dump the flash to the USB, just as we did last time, exactly the same, except this time the flash memory has been patched. So this dump should be different to the one we did before, which was the original flash that was pre-patched. Whereas this is the after patch flash, which should be different. It's good to have a backup of both of them, but we also want to check this flash dump and make sure it was patched successfully. Okay, so now that it's done, we can unplug our USB. We'll close out of the browser again, unplug our USB and plug it back into the computer once more. If you're starting to worry that there's too many steps involved here, we're getting there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back onto our USB stick, and we're going to take that dump, copy it to our backup folder on our computer, and this time I'll rename this one to dump _ patched to show that it's different from the original one we dumped. Then to check to see if it was patched successfully, there's a program called PyPS3 Tools, or PyPS3 Checker. So if you search for PyPS3 Checker in Google, it should be the top link on GitHub. If you just go to PyPS3 Tools, you can clone or download and download it as a zip file. Once you have that downloaded, you'll have it here. You can just extract PyPS3 Checker to your desktop. Now you will also need Python installed for this program to work. Search for python.org and go to downloads, and make sure you download version, not version 3, you want to download version 2.7.16. So click the download button to download and install Python. On Windows, you want the x86-64 installer and install Python. As you can see, I already have it installed, so I don't need to, but just go through the setup installer until you have Python version 2.7.16 installed, and then you are good to use PS3 Checker. So to use PS3 Checker, basically all we have to do is take the patched hex file and copy it into the same directory as PyPS3 Checker, and then drag it on top of the bat file that says drag and drop your dump here. And then a lot of information will pop up, and then you'll get this final checks complete message popping up at the end that will say total number of checks, and then it will have number of dangers and number of warnings. So you want them both to be 0, ideally. If you get a few warnings, it's not the end of the world. It should be okay, as long as you have 0 dangers. You must have 0 dangers. If you have a danger, then that's not good. Something's gone wrong. You'll have to go back onto the flash writer and try and patch the flash again. If you keep getting dangers multiple times, you might have to rewrite the original firmware back to the console and go through the entire tutorial again from scratch. So fingers crossed you don't get any dangers. If you get a few warnings though, it's not too bad. You should still be able to continue. But ideally you want to have, you know, 0 dangers and 0 warnings. So we're basically now ready to write a full custom firmware to our PS3 and have it completely jailbroken, an untethered jailbreak. So we're going to need to find some custom firmware. So where best to find the custom firmware? Well, there's a post on psxplace.com, which I will link in the description. It's this post right here. So it's 4.85 custom firmware, PS3 hen, homebrew tools, and custom firmware releases. So you want to head to the custom firmware tab right here. And this gives you the custom firmwares that are currently available for 4.85. Now, right now, there's not that many from when I'm recording this video, so I'm going to go with Rebug Lite, this version right here. For you, you might want to go with Rebug Rex if it's out by the time you're watching this video. Right now, it's unavailable, but if it's available for you, I would recommend that one, Rebug Rex custom firmware. But if it's not available yet, then just download 4.85.1 Rebug, or you can download 4.85 Spy if you prefer. So you basically click the firmware you want, so Rebug, and then that'll take me to this post about Rebug, and then I have to go right down to the bottom to click on rebug.me, which will take me to their official website, which has the firmware, and you have to scroll right down to the very bottom of the page, and then you'll find it here. So Rebug 4.85.1 Lite Edition. So I click that, it downloads this zip file to my computer, which I already have right here. And in that zip file, you will find a text file, and I can't really show you this in the video, unfortunately, but the link, the download link is inside the text file. So if you open that text file, there'll be a download link, copy it into your browser, download the file, and then you'll have the full Rebug firmware.pup file downloaded to your computer, as I have right here. So you just want to copy that to your USB drive. So you want to go into the PS3 folder, go into the update folder, delete our .pup file for the hybrid firmware, and then copy your custom firmware one into the update folder. Okay, and then once again, you're going to rename it so that it's just called PS3 updat.pup, just as before with the other ones, and you're good to go. You can delete the dump.hex file, and then you can also delete the flash 4.85.hex file. It's not required anymore. And we're good to go. So for the last time, we're going to unplug our USB drive and plug it into our PS3. But there's one other step that we have to perform before you install the custom firmware, and that is to just reboot your PS3. So turn off your PS3 and turn it back on again. Now the reason you have to do this is after patching the flash, the effects don't get applied at that point. You have to actually reboot the console in order for those changes to actually take effect. So it won't allow you to install the custom firmware if you try to install it without rebooting after you patch the flash. Alright, so I've rebooted the console now, and we should be able to install the custom firmware. So we're going to go to System Update, Update via Storage Media, and there we are, 4.85.1 Rebug Lite Edition. We're going to click OK. And license agreement, yes, accept, start, and we're installing our custom firmware. Again, if anything goes wrong, you can install it using the recovery mode, like we did with the hybrid firmware. Okay, and there's the custom firmware. You can see it say Rebug there when it started up instead of saying PlayStation 3, which means we are jailbroken completely. We've got our red, your traditional red Rebug PlayStation Network icon instead of blue. And I don't believe Rebug Lite actually has debug settings. No, it doesn't seem to unlock the debug settings. But you can tell that it's fully installed because you've got the package manager, which allows you to install package files from your USB drive or from the internal system storage. So it's got the Rebug toolbox there that you can install, which is something that comes with Rebug, which allows you to configure a lot of the options right there. But yeah, that's it. You've got your custom firmware installed. Now, if you are wondering where to go next, then check out the playlist link in the description. Episode 2, which follows this video, shows you how to install Webman mod and Multiman to allow you to do things like FTP to transfer files between your computer and the PS3, as well as access your games library, remotely launch your games, all that kind of stuff. There's multiple episodes showing you how to do lots of great stuff with your jailbroken PS3 so you can get the most out of it. So yeah, check that playlist link in the description. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.